Hello and welcome to this episode of Permission to Flow. I'm your host, Jessica Huang. And in this episode, I have the pleasure of talking with Gabi Koyenov. Gabi is the host of the Gabi Koyenov podcast and the owner of the Men's Therapy Studio. I had the pleasure of being on Gabi's podcast, so definitely head over there and check out that episode as well. But in this episode, Gabi shares his fascinating journey from aspiring to be a rabbi to becoming a therapist. He reflects on the transformative experience of studying theology and the difficult decision to leave his studies to pursue a master's degree in therapy. Gabi's story is an important reminder of following our intuition and being open to the unexpected twists and turns of life. As Gabi says in the episode, what feels like a painful ego death is actually God doing you a solid and moving you in the direction of your purpose. Gabi shares valuable insights on the benefits of therapy and coaching and the challenges and strategies of starting a private practice. We also talk about cultural expectations and stigmas surrounding men seeking therapy. So if you're looking to make a big career switch or starting your own therapy practice, then you don't want to miss this episode. And one quick announcement before we get started. If you are looking to make a career change and want to get the support that you need in order to move yourself in the direction of what it is that you really deep down inside know is meant for you, and need help in terms of pursuing that, not getting in your own way, and moving forward into your passion or purpose, then come work with me. Go to my website, jessicahuangcoaching.com, and book a free sales session with me to get started. And now, without further ado, here is my conversation with Gabi Koyenov. Welcome to this episode of Permission to Flow. So today I have on the podcast Gabi Koyenov. And Gabi, I'm so excited to have you on here. So I actually met Gabi at a podcasting meetup, and then I went on his podcast / YouTube, and now he's on mine. So welcome to the show, Gabi.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jessica. It was so fun having you on my podcast, and I'm so happy we're doing this conversation. And you are such a genuine, glowing person, and it's very fun to talk to you. So I'm happy we're doing this.
Oh, thank you so much. It's such an honor being on your podcast and now having you on my podcast. And, I feel like we could talk for hours and hours on end. So I am very excited about this conversation for everyone else to listen to it. So thank you so much again for coming on the show.
Of course, thank you for having me. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. So I always start every episode with the word purpose. So I would love to hear your take on what does purpose mean to you?
That's such a good question. Such a great question. I don't know. As soon as you asked me that question, I was thinking about this recent conversation I was having with my sister-in-law, where we were debating on if the afterlife is something that creates meaning or takes away meaning from life. So, when you say purpose, I think about, is there some type of greater grand scheme to the universe where there's something we should be doing with our lives or some type of greater calling? And I don't know, yeah, but that's that could be a very long philosophical conversation. We could do a whole episode on itself. But purpose, yeah, I think purpose means what's your intention? That's another way of understanding purpose. What are your intentions? What are your goals in life? How do you direct yourself? And then another way is does God or the universe have some type of greater plan for you, some type of destiny or mission?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I mean, I feel like we are going to end up getting into it because I know your background actually was in theology. And so I feel like we could get very philosophical up in here, which I'm not against at all. But that's such an interesting way to look at it. It's well, do you even believe that there is something greater? And how does that weigh in to how you see purpose? So I'm curious, what has your take in terms of finding your own purpose looked like for you?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Finding my own purpose, I think for me, I don't know, even as a teen. So I grew up Bukharian. For those that don't know what Bukharian is, it's a Jewish person from Uzbekistan, or Central Asia, really. So basically, there is a very strong connection, I think, to some type of higher power that is just kind of like very typical amongst Bukharian culture. Like you just feel a certain sense of like, there's a destiny for me. Everything happens for a reason. Like God has his plans. Like that's just very pervasive in the culture. So I feel like when you ask me like how have like for me navigating my own culture, I think I kind of grew up with that idea of like, everything happens for a reason. Like, and sometimes it's a little bit unhealthy. Like you try to read into certain things and be like, oh, is God trying to show me something or something like that? But but yeah, I feel like I always had this like in touchness with my inner consciousness that made me feel like, oh, I feel like like a certain intuition that I should go in certain directions, and that's been very helpful. And I think that that's very like cultural for me. But I think navigating since I was young, I was just kind of like plunged into American culture. Like I didn't go to a Bukharian school for high school, and it was kind of like navigating so many different types of people with different beliefs and upbringings and everything like that. And so navigating that, it's been this fun blend of chaos and like just figuring it out,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm so curious. So you were born in Uzbekistan and then came here as a child, or what was that kind of setup for you?
Yeah, so my parents were two daughters, my sisters, who I love so much, and I'm sure they're gonna listen to this. So hey, I love you guys. They have my two sisters. Then they came here and to America, to New York, and had me and my brother in their like early 40s. So yeah, we were there's like a my me and my oldest sister are 19 years apart, which
Oh,
is
wow.
pretty cool. Yeah, but my parents are very old school, so I kind of I kind of grew up in like little Uzbekistan, I guess you could say. you know, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's so interesting because it's like so I similarly like my parents came over here and had me here and also like older. So my parents were in like their late 30s. So
Mm.
that's so interesting. We have all that in common.
Interesting.
But totally different cultures, but
Probably why we get along so well, though. Yeah.
totally, totally. And I think it's why like we have such a natural ability to like talk about these topics of being like children of immigrants and everything,
Yeah.
which is what we discussed on your podcast, and now we can
Yeah.
like bring it back into here. But yeah, it's interesting how that kind of the influence of like you said your parents are more traditional or like kind of old school. So
Yeah.
how do you feel like that kind of informed you in terms of like finding your way and deciding like what you wanted to study or like what you wanted to do with your life?
You have great questions. I feel like, yeah. How did that inform me? Um, I think like with my parents, they were both very highly educated. Uzbekistan is part of the former Soviet Union, so they were. I think like the USSR was falling as they were growing up, or maybe as their parents, and basically, yeah. So basically, my dad is a mechanical engineer, and my mom's a nurse. So, and my grandmother was a doctor, and my other grandfather was an electrical engineer, and from my other set, one was a teacher and the other was a professor. So they're very like kind of like educated, a lot of pressure to like go into this. It wasn't. I wouldn't say pressure. In fact, it was just kind of like the norm. Like it was expected that I would either become like a doctor or something medical because that's very much in my family, or engineering. Like I was very good at math growing up, and then that totally tanked in high school. but But yeah, sorry. So the question was, how did my parents' upbringing inform me for my career?
Yeah,
So
like in terms of like what you decided to do. So I know you
right,
made a change, but like
yeah,
so just to back up because I already know this about you is that you
yeah,
originally decided to go into theology.
yeah.
So where did that come from? Like was that influenced by your family? But also I'm curious because you just said like that fell off, like becoming a doctor was kind of the plan, I guess, that you
Yeah,
thought was going to come to you because of your family.
yeah,
But
exactly.
that
Right.
fell off. So let's start there actually. How like what happened that doctor just kind of
So,
flew off?
so I'll tell you, it's a good question. In eighth grade, I was like up until eighth grade, I graduated valedictorian from my eighth grade class. So I was doing really well. Yeah. And it was a Bukharian private school, and it wasn't like a big school, so it's not like as impressive as it sounds, but it was pretty cool. But when I went to high school, I went to this private Ashkenazi high school, which Ashkenazi Jews are very different from Sephardi Jews, but that's a whole different story. I have on my YouTube channel like describing different cultures if somebody wants to learn more about that. But I went to this Ashkenazi high school, and Ashkenazim are extremely different from Sephardim and Bukharian, so it was very different. And then I don't know why in high school I didn't do well. I had like a big, maybe like a crisis of sorts where I just kind of realized that it's funny. It's almost like I kind of realized, my parents don't actually know everything. People that seem to be good people aren't actually necessarily good people. Teachers don't actually know it all. And kind of like this realization that the world is different than how I grew up. Just recognizing that like people are more human. Like I think as a kid growing up, and I think most people think like this, that adults just know something that we don't. Like somehow when you become an adult, you get some type of revelation. That never happens. It never does. And I think sometimes you realize that as a teenager, maybe sometimes not. But I had a sort of crisis, and then I didn't really do too well in high school. And I realized then I connected with so this is like the first 2 years of high school. And then I connected with my school counselor, who basically what happened was I developed this massive crush on this girl, and massive crush, huge crush. And I went to my school counselor to, like, I guess talk to him about it. And from that, actually, we started working together. And also with my best friend, Yar, who in high school, whatever, this is going off on a little bit of a tangent, but it's worth calling out. Yar was 2 years older than me because he came from Israel to America. So he was put back a grade, and I skipped a grade. I just started school early. So he was 2 years older than me, and he's like 6'1", like, athletic, extremely smart, probably like he's very street smart. Like he had friends that were many years older than him, and he just always knew his way around. He was so brilliant, and he would just shuffle a deck of cards, and people would just watch him because of how charismatic he was. He was just this like badass, awesome leader. So we connected in earlier in high school. He became my best friend, and he was like, Gabi, you have to speak with Yoni. We kind of thought we were cool. We kind of thought we were a little bit from the streets. So we used a little like, you have to connect with this brother Yoni, So we did. Like I did, and he was awesome. Yoni, he was my school counselor, and he really kind of influenced my life and made me realize I want to do therapy because of how big of an influence he had on me. So I always kind of knew I wanted to become a therapist just because of that influence. And my first job out of college, was a school counselor, which was awesome. I loved that job so much. It was the best job ever. But what happened was, from leaving high school to going into theology, I was agnostic in high school, like basically completely agnostic. My parents were actually very traditional. They weren't theological like that. They just kind of, did the laws, and they practiced Judaism. We had our Friday night meals, and our Shabbat day meals, which was, like Jewish tradition, basic. Not really too theological. Like I asked my father why he believes in Judaism, like why is he religious and Jewish, and his answer was just, what do you mean, God? Like I believe in God. So like not really such a thought out. Just this is who he is, So what happened was I was agnostic in high school, and I did believe in some type of force in the universe, like some type of God, but not necessarily that it's Jewish or anything like that. And then my first year out of high school, I went to a religious school just because that's what a lot of my friends were doing. So I went to a religious school, and I was doing this accelerated undergrad program called Excelsior. I don't know if it still exists, but it's basically one of those things that you can get your degree in a year by just taking a bunch of club courses and skipping ahead. So I was doing that while I was in this theological school to try and figure out my faith. And at that point, I just kind of came to the realization that I do believe through various like searching, and I decided to like lean into it. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Well, first off, I love what you said there about your parents not necessarily knowing the best and like not being like the people that know better than you. I think that to me, you had that realization very early.
Yeah.
I don't know, like, because I feel like it took me a lot longer to come to that realization. And I think it's actually to your benefit in a way where you were like I'm sure it was tough to go through because I always think it's a little hard, like a little bit of an earth shattering moment when you realize like, oh, my parents aren't perfect. My world isn't perfect. Like I thought everyone was supposed to you had them on this pedestal as you talked about. But Yeah, because I feel like I came to that in my 20s and it kind of
Mm,
like shattered my world. And so I can
mm,
understand how, because of that, it made you go like, wait, what am I doing? Like, people
yeah.
around me don't, like, I'm not going to just take their instructions, I guess, is kind of what I'm hearing. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, 100% correct. 100%. Me and Yar were like rebels. Yar more than me. He took me under his wing, and I'm so grateful for him that he did that. But yeah, we were rebels, and I feel like I try to carry that to this day. But I'm curious, what was your story that in your 20s? What was that earth-shattering moment for you?
I don't know if I can like really pinpoint the exact moment that it
Mm,
happened, but I feel like in my 20s, I started just kind of realizing like, oh, my parent. Actually, no, I do know what really hit me. I think it was when my father suffered from a heart attack.
mm,
I'm trying to remember how, sometime in my 20s, this was like a number of years ago. I feel like that was a major moment for me where it made me be like, oh, I thought my dad was like the like pinnacle of health. Like, I thought that like he was doing all the right things. And then I was like, wait, when I actually look at it, like there were a lot of ways in which he wasn't.
mm,
And he was a smoker, very much of the times and all those kind of things. And I don't know why my brain just was like disassociated the smoking from like, obviously it's a very unhealthy habit, but because I had him on such a pedestal, it was really like, kind of
yeah.
huge when I was like, oh, wait, you've been doing things that are not good for you. And I'm actually doing things that are better for me than what you've been doing. And
Mm,
like, that kind of like just that ranking of going like, oh, I'm assuming that you're doing all the right things and
mm,
realizing that he was not. And like, and then I realizing that on a broader scope of like all the like adults around me or the
mm.
people that I kind of like put above me, that's I think was a big kind of like earth-shattering moment for me.
Yeah. That.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. It certainly is. It's really earth-shattering. Anyone going through it, it's earth-shattering, but I'm sure it's so worth it and so necessary to have that realization to be an adult because I think that's once you realize that they're human, like now you can really forgive them and accept them and accept yourself too, honestly.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because I love what you said, where it's just like, yeah, it's not like we suddenly become like perfect human beings when we become an adult.
Right.
And now that we've like grown up more, like it's just
Yeah.
like, no,
Yeah.
that's not how this actually works. So
Right.
it's just such an interesting realization. So yeah, I feel like you had that realization pretty young compared to me. I feel like it took me an extra decade.
Yeah, no, I'm so lucky that I did. It almost reminds me actually. I saw this Instagram video and it's funny because it's a joke video, so just explaining it is kind of going to kill it. But the caption was like randomly gaining consciousness in kindergarten. And you see like this guy's like playing with a toy and then all of a sudden he's like what am I doing here? And he has a whole existential crisis, like what's going on? And the preschool teacher's like, okay, nap time, like whatever. And like he sees these kids like just playing and drooling everywhere. It's like so funny. It's like that. That's kind of what happened to me. I felt like all of a sudden I was like, whoa, like what is going on here? Like what is happening? Like why do we have these arbitrary rules? And I kind of just became a rule breaker, like a quiet rule breaker, I would say. I never got myself into trouble or anything like that, um, but just I'd try to drink alcohol and whatever. I don't want to, kids don't drink if you're listening to this, but yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah, I love that. But I think that there's such value in having that realization because it's like you're allowing yourself to be your own authority
Yeah.
in a way that I think is often challenging, especially for children of immigrants. I think that it's like we're instilled with so much of like the values but I think it's like everyone really goes through this, right? Where it's like your parents know best and like we try and like uphold what they think that they want for you or, so it's like your family is like, well, we're expecting you to become a doctor. And you're like, oh no, I'm not taking on your authority anymore. And I'm going to go in a different direction. So I think that's super powerful. Like no matter what age we have that
Yeah.
realization to kind of take in and be like, oh, actually, I think I do know how to navigate things. And I thought it was interesting because you mentioned intuition.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, it sounds like you started kind of honing your intuition like pretty early. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would just say that like I think culturally for Bulgarians it's just very normal to have a strong sense of intuition and to follow your gut. Like that's kind of like it's just a part of the culture. It's not something you're ever really taught. It's just something that is like normal to do. And I feel like in Western culture and American culture, it's so different where we're taught to like almost like ignore our bodies and our intuitions and whatever, and I feel like that's so harmful, and it's strange. I we all do it to a degree, ignore
Sure.
ourselves and work harder than we should and not take the breaks that we should, and we doom scroll too often because of it and have a hard time sleeping or just being with our own thoughts because we're afraid to just let ourselves be, which is so sad. And yeah, if that's your state, you could definitely get help and make your life better, because that's not how your life should be.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that that's like a value of your background. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. And I don't want to say, like, I'm sure there are people within the culture that are not living up to it, but that's from my perspective how I see it. But I'll tell you, the change actually for me when I decided to become a doctor to a therapist, that was totally cool. My parents were very much on board because it was still like within the like, oh, you'll be like a like Sigmund Freud, whatever, like that. That was still cool. Yeah, but when I went to a religious school after high school, like to kind of figure out my faith, it's called the yeshiva. So for those that don't know, just to give a little context, I have a YouTube video also on my channel describing what yeshiva is for anyone that wants more details. But basically, yeshiva is from 7:30 in the morning, there's like prayers until 11 at night, where the whole time you're studying Talmud, and I'll explain a little bit what Talmud is. There's prayers and ethics and philosophy, basically. So that's literally the whole day, from literally 7 in the morning to 11 p.m. And you have like an hour for breakfast, about an hour and a half for lunch, hour for dinner, kind of thing. So your whole day is just basically study the whole time. Um, yeah. So I went to a program my first year after that had basically the morning and the afternoon, and then at nighttime you could do college. So I was doing college at that point, and I was just trying to figure out my faith. And I had these amazing rabbis. I'm so grateful for these people. They've changed they've influenced me and changed my life and made me a million times of a better person. And just the number one thing that if I could just point out to them what was so like awe-inspiring about them was that they were just happy. Every day they would come in, they were passionate. They were happy. They loved what they were doing. They literally came in and it was like, oh guys, let's go, let's study. And they were so sincere and so deep and so smart. And the rebbe of that yeshiva, like the main rebbe, he's called the Rosh Yeshiva. He's kind of like the Dumbledore of the school. He's like he's like the headmaster. So that man, the Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Kramer, was a genius, brilliant person. And for those that don't know, for Talmud, what Talmud is, it's basically Jewish law interpreted from the Bible, and it's extremely logical. Like, and I'm sure, like, if you're studying it from an external logic, it might not hold up with like classical logic rules or whatever. But within itself, there's a very strong logic. Like, things have to make sense internally. So the way it works is that you read a passage of the Bible or whatever it is, right? There's like maybe one or two words, and then from that, the rabbis, like 1,000 years ago, this is written a long time ago, derive that, oh, this is the law that you're like the Bible is teaching you, this is what you're supposed to do. So then from that, there's these different rabbis arguing about the opinion, and there's these logical arguments like question answer. That's the style it's written in, question answer until you come to a conclusion. So throughout the generations, there have been these other rabbis that have commented and created different questions. So there are many layers that it goes. Because say, in theory, like within Orthodox Judaism, they believe the Bible was written 3,500 years ago. And then they believe the Mishnah, which is like the next level past that, was written about 2,000 years ago. The Mishnah is like the first written explanation of how to understand the Bible. Like from the written Bible to practice laws. So like when Orthodox Jews, they keep kosher, they keep Shabbat, they, whatever the laws of being an Orthodox Jew are, that was the first time it was written down as the interpretation. Because the Bible is hard to understand. It's not always very clear what you're what law is being prescribed here. So the Mishnah breaks down exactly what law it is. Then you have the Gemara that was written about 16 or 1700 years ago, I believe. Maybe I'm mistaken. But the Gemara explains the Mishnah. And then you have different rabbis throughout the generations that explain and ask questions basically on the Gemara. So the whole thing that you're studying all day is just logic. And the reason why this is done from morning to night and why it's so important and why there's so much emphasis put on it is because Orthodox Jews believe that, the Bible was given from God. So how to understand the Bible, how to understand breaking it like God's thought process in a sense, is basically thinking more like God. So the idea is like you're connecting yourself to God in this way of thinking through channeling your brain and thought and intellect, which is what makes humans more unique than animals. So we're connecting through God through our intellect, and understanding how he thinks, so that we become, in a sense, like more like him, more connected to him, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Thank you for explaining that because I like don't have a lot of background in it, but I
Yeah.
think that's so interesting from the standpoint of like the closeness and like the trying to get closer to God and like wanting to really understand it, the wisdom behind the books and really trying to kind of pull and it sounds like there's a lot of like questioning and trying to
Yeah.
understand. Is
Yeah,
that
yeah,
true?
100%. The whole thing is just questioning and trying to understand, and it's legitimately. I've never been to like a monastery. I don't really know what like other faiths, like I guess they're like what they do in monasteries, but I imagine it's very similar in a sense, where it's just kind of like all day focusing on becoming enlightened in a sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
No, it's very interesting just because it's true. It's like we you have these like texts, these great texts from like thousands and thousands of years ago, but it's like
yeah,
trying to understand like what it really means and what
right.
it's trying to teach you. And it I don't know, it's so interesting because it's like we can look at it in so many different lenses and different people will take different things from the readings, I'm sure. And
Yeah,
it's like everyone's going to have their own interpretation in
exactly.
certain
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
ways, right? But
100%.
somehow we end up still in like a, I don't know, organized religion is very fascinating to me from that
It is
standpoint of
fascinating.
like
Yeah.
creating these kind of constructs off of
Mhm.
these texts because it is someone's interpretation of them, right?
100%, yeah, yeah, 100%. It's someone's interpretation, and I think that like there are rules also about
Mm.
like things like how you ask and what types of questions there are to ask. It's very interesting, and it's very easy to get dissolved into that world and feel like you like this is the right thing to do. Like I'll tell you, I have my own. Okay, so just I continuing with the story actually. So I love my rabbis. I'm so grateful for them. They really showed me purpose and meaning in life, and they've sharpened my mind tremendously to be able to like think in that way, like to really be analytical and like break down a concept and really try to understand it, as well as like meaning and connecting to God and what that means. Like I was not oriented, and like I was actually my nature, I would say, is more philosophical and wanting to be oriented to that. So they gave me like the platform and the avenue to actually like learn those things in an in-depth way, and I'm so grateful that I did that. And like honestly, I liken that experience to Hogwarts because it's it's so esoteric. It's so esoteric, and it's so like um, just this world that you get like sucked into with these rules, and it legitimately is. It's kind of like studying magic in a sense, almost. Obviously, it has nothing to do with magic, but it's like um, it's just really cool, and I'm so grateful for that experience. But I do have like problems with it now that I'm not like in it. I do have certain issues with the community. I think nothing like negative, and I kind of want to be careful talking about it to an external audience because I feel like this is more criticism that I would give within my community, not to like say to the outside.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, no problem. But like to share a little bit, I think within the yeshiva community, like there's a lot of pressure for everyone to go into yeshiva for as long as possible, and that's becoming more and more normal. And I personally am against that because I think everyone's different, and not everyone should be doing that all day. And I think like if you're just sitting there learning, like it's not what I don't think it's actually what God wants for somebody to do for as long as possible. I think God wants, like God created us to be in this world, to live in this world, to participate. And I feel like the pressure for individuals that, yeah, fine, maybe they could go to yeshiva for a few years, but just to tell them to go beyond that, it's really, I feel like it's unhealthy, and it's people. There are people that stay longer than they should, and it's like, I don't think they're doing the right thing, but yet there's a sort of community pressure to do it, and yeah.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. Well, and so just to be clear, you were saying it sounded like you were kind of doing all the study during the day, and then in the evenings you were kind of doing college coursework. Is
Yeah, I
that
was
is
doing
that kind of
college.
how it worked?
Yeah, that was how it worked, and I love that. And I did that for about a year, and then I decided after a year that I'm not gonna continue college. I got 90 credits, which is great. Like and I ended up using those credits to graduate. But basically, I decided I was gonna do Talmud study full time. So I stopped doing college at night, and I would just study in this yeshiva full time, and I did that without any other college for 4 years about where I was studying, and I thought I was going to become a rabbi, basically. And then I thought maybe I would get a therapist degree on the side, and like as a rabbi, I could like also counsel people. Like that was kind of my thought process. But after 4 years, I had to do my master's, and so I started college again at night. But it was so overwhelming to keep up my grades with continuing my study, and I really didn't know what to do. And I was burning out, badly burning out, like really, really, really badly burning out because it was very intense. Like I said, the schedule is extremely intense. You don't really have a lot of free time. And I was only given 2 nights a week to do college. And I'm doing a master's program full time. So I'm writing 10-page papers, having to read the research papers, and they're really hard to read sometimes, having to read all these papers and textbooks and other projects that I was doing. It was very, very, very overwhelming, and I couldn't balance it. And basically I had a conversation with a rabbi that I was very close with, and he was like, and I was talking with him about like what the right thing to do is with my goals, that I want to start a family, and these were things that I like. Eventually, I wanted to start a family. Not at that point. I was 23 at that time, so but I knew I wanted to do that eventually. So I knew I needed my master's and to get started on working and all that. And basically, we came to the decision that like, yeah, I think it would be better if you left to pursue your master's, and maybe did like you could still study and be a part of everything, but you have to focus on that more than that, because I was just burning out and couldn't handle it. And I just started breaking down, crying, breaking down. Like I lost it. I was crying so badly. And he's like, "Why are you crying? Like, what are you crying about?" And I was like, "This was like, I put so much into this. I really wanted this. This was like my dream and my goal. And I wanted to become a rabbi. And like, I'm seeing that like this goal it's not going to work out for me." And it was so heartbreaking. And I was crying like so badly. And ultimately I left, and it was very heartbreaking. It was very hard. But I think it was the best thing for me. Like, I really genuinely think that, like, now in hindsight, I really genuinely think, like, God was doing me a massive solid. Like, a massive solid. Because, like, I look back at it, and I'm really grateful for my experience that I had there, and it's something I'll carry with me forever, and I would never take it back because of how beautiful and amazing it was. But, like, I'm realizing that, like, that's not what I feel like there was so much more for me in the world than just within that bubble that I was in. That it was a comfortable bubble. It was beautiful. I really liked it. I really enjoyed it. I really felt like I was doing something good and really attaining this, like, going on this enlightenment path, so to speak. And like leaving that, it's heartbreaking. But I'm realizing now, like, oh, God has so much more in store for me than just that. And now it's like maybe 8 years later, but yeah, that's
Wow.
that's the story. Yeah.
Well, first off, thank you for sharing because it's not easy to really talk about those like really tough moments. And so I appreciate you being willing and open to talk about it. And well, first off, just to clarify, so your master's program was in like moving you towards therapy, is that correct?
Yeah, my master's program was moving me towards therapy. Okay, so this yeshiva offers they give you a bachelor's program. They're accredited as well.
Uh-huh.
So I was, because I'm studying all day, kind of like they got those courses to be accredited. So I was studying philosophy and ethics and Jewish law kind of all day. So I got a bachelor's in Talmudic law and rabbinic literature, and then I was doing this master's in marriage and family therapy and professional clinical counseling at the same time.
Okay, got it. So yeah, I think that's so interesting though, because so you started this master's program, like still thinking you wanted to become a rabbi at that
Yeah,
point?
yeah.
Okay, so it was
Uh,
like you were
yeah.
like, I'm going to become a rabbi and I'm going to study to move into therapy.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking, right. I was thinking like primarily I would be a rabbi, and then I would have this degree to like, if like, because rabbis do a lot of counseling as well, one-on-one,
Sure.
like helping
Yeah.
couples or this or that, whatever.
Hmm.
So I was thinking that like I want to just have professional training in it, so that if I'm a rabbi and people want to come talk to me, like I'll be professionally trained. That was my thought process.
Got it. And then it kind of overtook it. I think that's so interesting because like what you're describing it reminds me of like this idea of like you're almost like it's like a part of you is dying, right? Like, and I'm sure that's what it felt like. And the way that you talked about like the experience, like definitely speaks to that, right? Like it's a part of you is dying, the part of you that thought like, this is the path, this is the way I'm going to go. And then suddenly you're like, wait, that's not what I'm doing. And I feel like that is so tough to go through. So I appreciate that idea. Like, and it's so interesting because how you talked about now, you're like, oh, that was actually God doing me a solid. I love the way you phrased that. That was great.
Yeah, right.
Right. Where
That
it's
was
like, that actually was the right thing.
yeah,
But it's like in that moment, I'm sure it was so hard for you to see that, right? Like
so
in that
heartbreaking.
moment, you're like devastated.
Devastated. Yeah, really devastated. Um, like I think it's so hard to always look back at something, but I think even at that point, like I understood, like this is what God wants for me, but it was still heartbreaking. It was still extremely heartbreaking. Because it was like it was my dream. It was something that I invested so much time and energy to, and I was very good at it. Like I enjoyed the study, and also so within there's something called Kirov, which means you work with unaffiliated Jews or Jews that are less affiliated. And I used to do a lot of Kirov opportunities just to be able to talk with people that were unaffiliated and bring them. It's not exactly like proselytizing, maybe a little bit, but like proselytizing, you would go to somebody like a total stranger. This is a little different. They would have these camps for kids, for parents that maybe wanted their kids to become more affiliated. So they would have these programs to just connect people that wanted to connect with people that were like more experienced and like yeshiva guys such as myself.
Sure.
Yeah, so that was the connection. It wasn't like I was going to people that like didn't want. Hey, have you heard of God or whatever? Um, but yeah, I was extremely good at it. Like I was always in all these camps that I went to. I was always the counselor that everyone wanted to hang out with and talk to, and I really felt like I connected with a lot of people, and especially like people that were like thought out, and I could have these philosophical conversations with them. It was awesome. I loved it. So it just felt like. I don't know what the word is, a waste of a talent. I don't know, but yeah, it felt like a death, and since then I've sort of like had many deaths, but yeah, yeah,
Yeah, but that was like the big one. I
that was a big one, I would say. Like, it's so funny. I think like there's like the concept of like an ego death or something where like your life kind of shatters. Um, high school, that example that I was talking about in high school, like that's an ego death. Like that's like your world just gets shattered. Like what are you really? Like what's going on? Then that was a big one too. It was like a death of another identity where it was like I really wanted to go down this path and like just realizing it's not going to happen. You know?
Yeah, I love that. I think it's interesting because it's like within a lifetime, I feel like we, in a way, live multiple lifetimes where it's
Yeah,
just
for sure.
like you evolve into like a totally different version of yourself and like live a totally different life. And it sounds like, that these definitely are kind of those moments where it's like, oh, I just like shifted into a totally different state than where I thought I was going. And now we're over here now.
Yeah, right. Can I tell you an anecdotal story? It's funny.
Absolutely.
So, when I was single, I had these incredible best friends that we would hang out all the time, and it was awesome. I love these people, to death. They're still my best friends, but we definitely don't hang out like we used to. Every once in a while, we'll get together or whatever. Now I'm a father, and it's tough. So my wife agreed to let me go out with my best friend to Texas. He lives out there, but I'm going to Texas, and literally, I can't even explain to you. The feeling feels like that I'm going on this trip for 1 week. It literally feels like as if you told me, like, imagine if I'm dead, right? Like, so I'm a ghost, and I'm like, yeah, it's cool, whatever. I'm living out in the afterlife. It's pretty cool. And then you tell me, like, you could come back to life for 1 week. It's literally the same feeling. It's literally just like, oh my god, like it's gonna be awesome. We're gonna like go party and everything. You know what I mean?
That's so funny. It makes me think of there was this thing. This is a random
Yeah.
thought, but it's made me think of on How I Met Your Mother, which was a show I really loved. They
Yeah.
use this term revertigo, where it's like when you're around certain people, you suddenly like revert into the version of you that you were when you were around them. And I feel
Yeah,
like that's what you're speaking to right now.
yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's like like I'm so excited for this trip. I'm like, oh yeah, it's gonna be so awesome. And it's like that used to be my life every day. You know what I mean?
Did it feel good going back into this former version of yourself?
Like to think I hadn't done the trip yet, but
Oh, okay.
yeah, like it's coming up. Like it just feels like you're telling me like I could come back. And that's the funny. Like I love my life now. Like I love my wife. I love my child. I love everything about it. But like it just feels so fun to like okay, I'm gonna go and like almost like be single for a week again.
I love that. I love
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
I hope you have a great time on your upcoming trip then.
No, thank you so much. Yeah. To me, like thinking about it feels great. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. So, yeah, so you went down this path, you suddenly like decide to go and become a therapist, which was your original plan,
Yeah.
kind of, and like that's what I thought was so interesting is like you have mentioned before that like in high school you already thought you were going to become a therapist.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then it was like you took this detour and which like the therapy was still underlying, but now you're like fully doing therapy.
Yeah. Now I'm fully doing therapy. Yeah. And I
Right.
love it. Yeah, can I also tell you in high school, I learned to hypnotize in high school. And
Oh,
I was hypnotizing kids in my high school all the time because like I knew I wanted to become a therapist. So I was like I have to learn hypnosis. I wanted to be like at that point especially also because with my friend Yair, we were just both very like philosophical in that sense and like we wanted to be like the next like Freud, Jung, like kind of like we wanted to be at that level, you know. Now I don't have an ambition to be at that level. I love just doing therapy, but yeah. Yeah.
wait, and side note, because I think you like offhand mentioned this, but your parents were on board with the therapy, but they were
Oh,
less on board with the theology. I don't
they
think we
were
could.
yeah,
Okay.
we didn't talk about that. They were not on board with the theology. They were not. They came around to it actually, but they didn't want me to go to rabbi school and become a rabbi at all. They didn't want that.
I
Um,
think that's interesting. This was like your rebellion was going to theology school.
you know, that's so interesting. Yeah, maybe it was some form of rebellion. It makes sense. Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think like yeah, they were not on board with it at all. And I wouldn't say that I did it to spite them. I think I was just thinking of myself at that time and like doing what I thought was right. But yeah, maybe some part of me was like, yeah, you know, spiting and spite. Uh, so funny. But then they came around to it. They were kind of like, okay, well, because I was doing my master's. Like I told them I wanted to do my master's after, and
Hmm.
so they were more on board. They were like, okay, you know, at least he's gonna have a degree, something. So
Right, right. Okay, cool. And so I'm assuming they were happy when you decided to then switch back to really focusing on therapy? Or how did they feel about that switch?
that's such a good question. You know, I'm trying to think about it, and funny enough, I don't think I even told them. You know,
Really?
I don't know if I even told them. Yeah. Like I don't think I ever had a conversation with them about that.
Interesting.
I'm like trying to think.
Interesting.
Like I'm sure I did, just because I'm sure I did, but nothing is standing out to me in my memory of
Hmm.
like what that conversation was like, and I think they were just like okay, you know, they were fine.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
I mean, it sounds like they were more on board with that from the get-go anyway,
yeah,
so maybe
yeah,
it like
exactly.
was kind of a moot point. But actually, I'm curious, like what has been because to me it's like my family as being more traditional was never very on board with therapy or
Hmm.
like mental health and everything. And since considering that that's been such a focal point for you, like how has it been in terms of like your background and your family, knowing that you also come from a more traditional background?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's an amazing question. I think it's such a good question. My parents were extremely against going to therapy and extremely against me going to therapy too, even for my school counselor, because they're like therapy's for crazy people, you know.
Right.
um, like that kind of thing. And I think they were thinking like, okay, I could be a professor or you know working with crazy people too or whatever, like crazy people, whatever. Um, so to them it was like, yeah, like my mom actually. So like in Uzbekistan she was a midwife, and then here she was a nurse. And then for a while she was working with like special needs cases. So like for her also it would be like, okay, you're working with like you know bipolar, schizophrenia, stuff like that. So that was like in her mind, maybe I don't know, or people depressed, stuff like that. Um, Sorry, where am I going with this? My parents. Oh yeah, so them
Yeah.
with therapy, yeah. Um, they, I think they've changed their minds. Like I still don't think I wouldn't even want to say if they were in therapy because it's not, it's nobody's business. But like I think they've come around to the idea of it. You know, they've come around to you know even for themselves. I think they will be open to it if they decided that that was something they wanted to do. Um, and yeah, and I think for myself too, I never had. I think to me, it's like I don't have an issue kind of not following society's structures and rules. So like to me, like my parents were like, "Oh, therapy's for crazy people," and I was like, "What are you talking about?" You know, like the yoni is awesome, and I'm not crazy, and it's just great talking with them. Like I get so much clarity in my life, and so yeah, that's how I think I navigated it for myself.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I had to navigate that as well. That's why I was like so curious what your thoughts were on it because I remember I started seeing a therapist maybe probably around like 23 or something like that,
Mm,
24. And I was like, "Oh, I feel a lot better when I go to therapy." But my parents like fought me on it
mm. Yeah,
because
yeah.
Yeah, because of that exact idea. Like therapy is for crazy people. Like you're not crazy. Like why would you need therapy? And I think there's I don't know if you experience this, but I think there's also this idea of like why would you go and talk to someone outside the family?
Oh, 100%, yes. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's like, oh, this is like our stuff. Like you don't
Right.
go sharing this with like strangers. So
100%. Yeah.
yeah, I feel like there's a
Yeah.
lot of that going on that keeps
Right.
a lot of people from doing therapy. But it's true. Like I think you and I both kind of exemplify going against that grain, going like, oh, but it's helping me. And so why would I not do it?
Yeah.
And so and granted it's like I just think as a society like therapy has just become so normalized now, but I'm thinking like back 10, 20 years ago it's like very very weird,
Right,
right?
right, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, thank God the culture has shifted on that because therapy is so helpful and so important. And for those wondering, therapy is HIPAA compliant, so your therapist cannot tell anybody like it's not getting back to your family whatever you tell your therapist. Um, unless obviously you're trying to murder somebody in your family, but that's the exception.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, therapy is extremely helpful, and it's helpful for families too. I don't want to talk about like clients' stories, but it's helpful.
Of course.
It's it definitely works. And if you've had a therapist and it didn't work, try again. Like actually, so Yoni was the third therapist I went to. My school counselor was the third one. We had two different school counselors, and I went to the two others first, unfortunately, before I went to Yoni. And the other two, I'm sorry to say this, but they sucked. They were horrible. And then Yoni was like amazing, and he really changed my life around. So yeah, sometimes you may have to see a few therapists before you find one that really works for you, but it's extremely, extremely helpful. And it helps you even just talking, like expressing how your week went and having somebody that listens to you and helps you try to improve it in like your day to day or whatever, so helpful and keeps you accountable. And then obviously for deeper issues to help you reprocess and go through stories and be in control of your own narrative in a sense. And that's so important, and it's so helpful and valuable. So I very much encourage therapy, and also family counseling helps a lot, and couples counseling helps. So
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree more. I'm a huge proponent of therapy. I love my therapist. I think she's amazing.
yeah,
But I think that's such a good point though, is like you might not find the right person in the first one, and it might take a
right,
few attempts to like find the right person. Cause like to me it's that yeah, not all therapists are exactly the same, and like finding the one that kind of suits you and who you are might take some trial and error. So I think that's such a good point.
yeah,
Uh,
exactly. And
so
what
I,
else helps is coaching. Coaching is awesome. Yeah, coaching is great. No, but seriously, coaching keeps you accountable and keeps you, on point with your goals and your tasks, and helps you just navigate a world that, is perhaps foreign. And it's so important to have a mentor and a coach and somebody to help you guide through life. So,
Yeah, we're very related, I feel
yeah,
like,
absolutely.
areas. But yes, coaching obviously I would say is amazing, helps you move towards your goals and everything. And yeah, it's true. Like just having that sounding board, and I don't know, to me it's like I love coaching just because I'm helping navigate people in like a way that I've been there before. And it's
Right.
like, okay, like this is what has worked, like this is what I've seen other people be able to work for them. Like it's like I'm focusing all my energy on figuring that out
Mm,
and helping them navigate that, right? So it's like that sounding board, I feel like that we all need from time to time instead of trying to like go it alone. And it's like we can get so stuck in our own minds. And I feel like both coaching and therapy, the benefit is like just having someone listen to you and be able to like help you navigate and like sort out like what really suits you.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly. Exactly.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So, what was it kind of, going back along your path, like when you decided, like, I'm going to do therapy now, like fully, and then starting up your own practice? Like, what has that been like for you of moving? You talked a little bit to me
Yeah.
the first time we met about it, but what has that been like for you?
It's been hell. Yeah, it's been wild. Again, I think it's God doing me more solids, and it's always impossible to see. But I'll tell you the story in full form. My first job out of college, out of my master's program, my university, was working as a school counselor. and I loved that job. I loved that job. I was amazing at the job. I loved, like, not to toot my own horn, but every day kids would be like, "Oh, yeah, I really need to talk to you," and this, that, like every single day. And I was working in a middle school, fifth to eighth grade, and it was awesome. It was the best. I loved coming into work and being appreciated. And I had like a big person. I would come with my guitar and I would play some guitar and play some songs. And like the kids would just like, they would just like come around, and like it was just cool. It was awesome. It was a vibe. And like so I really loved the job, and every day I was appreciated, and it was like 2 miles away from where I live, so I would bike to work. It was awesome. Like totally, totally, totally awesome. And I was there for 2 years. And what happened was that the agency, the way that I was placed in the school was that I was getting paid through an agency that would place me in that school. So basically, the agency lost funding for me, and I had to leave. It was so sad. It was so sad. I love that job so 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 much, and it was really 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 sad to leave. So because I was doing such a good job there too, which was like really horrible, and the school was so sad and everything, and so it was tough, and I left. But at that point, I started it actually was perfect timing because I just got my license, so I was able to start my practice. Otherwise, it would be horrible. I wouldn't be able to start my own practice. So anyways, I started my own practice. It was very tough in the beginning to navigate like how to do it. Even ChatGPT is your friend. If anybody does not know how to use ChatGPT, I'm telling you, it's the most worth it tool to learn to use. Like, you need to learn ChatGPT yesterday. Like literally, like a year ago, honestly. Most important tool ever. Was using ChatGPT a lot to help me with my website, just to navigate stuff, and just figuring out different pages to go on. Psychology Today didn't help me. All these other platforms did not help me. The only thing that I found helped me was ZocDoc. Was amazing at sending referrals. But here's the other thing. I'm gonna make a YouTube video about this actually, so it'll be explained more. But you need to get on something called Headway or Alma, like whatever. I mean, I use Headway personally, and Headway's the best because it's free, so why not? But basically, they bill clients insurance for you. So they will put you on all the insurance panels. It takes a couple of months to get on the insurance panels, but they will put you on insurance panels, and then all you do is the paperwork and all that, and they basically bill the insurance for you. They take, I think, a generous cut, honestly, but they pay you pretty well. They pay you better than the other platforms will, and they're free. So it's awesome. I mean, once you get on your feet and you have enough money that you don't need money every 2 weeks, you can start billing the insurance yourself, and then you'll get paid like every 1 to 3 months. So if you could survive 1 to 3 months without getting paid, you could bill the insurance yourself and panel it yourself. But there's a lot more paperwork involved, and you also have to wait to get paid. So Headway will pay you upfront every 2 weeks, which is great. And then basically, once you do that, you get on ZocDoc, and then ZocDoc, I turned off my ZocDoc for a few months. I returned it back on for a day, and I got 12 referrals in one day. So it's literally just like, it's the best. If you're a therapist and you're struggling to get clients, like ZocDoc's not paying me, Headway is not paying me, get on Headway, get on ZocDoc, and you will be full. Oh, and get good reviews. Oh my God, get good reviews. Get good reviews. Please do not get bad reviews on ZocDoc. If you get even one bad review on ZocDoc, you're screwed. Like, I got a bad review from a client I didn't even see, because there was a it was an accidental double booking. Okay, this is so important. If you're whatever, there's so much information, guys. Check out my YouTube video on whenever it comes out on starting your own private practice and using ZocDoc and Headway, because there's a lot of little things you need to know as well, and I'll go into it in more detail there. That video I have not created it yet, but I will. But basically, I accidentally had a double booking, and so I emailed this client, "Hey, there was an accidental double booking. Can you please change sessions, like, to a different time?" And I, sent them. They didn't respond to the email. I called them, and no response to the call either. And then I basically was like, okay, client. Then later, the client got in touch with me, like, "Hey, you missed our session." So I said, "Hey, I emailed you and tried calling you. That there was an accidental double booking, and I didn't hear back from you, and I didn't so I had to cancel our session." So he left me a bad review. I had to go on ZocDoc and dispute it, and ZocDoc was giving me a hard time until I basically went in and filed it as a no-show. I did get the review taken off because I didn't even see the client, and but within that time that guy gave me a bad review, I had a 1-star review because of that guy. I got 0 bookings. So I was going from like 6 bookings a day or something like that to literally 0 bookings overnight, which is crazy. So do not get any bad reviews.
Ugh, it also just like goes to show you the power of like reviews though, and like
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know, like I always think it's interesting like why people put like will put out bad reviews on things, like that we get so upset about things. And that's why like the age of the internet is just so wild to me, where it's just like anyone anywhere could go on the internet and like say bad things about you these
Right.
days,
Yeah.
with like without you actually doing anything wrong. And
Yeah.
that is such an interesting story, but I'm glad you were able to like dispute it so that ZocDoc can
Yeah.
still be so fruitful for you.
Yeah, 100%. I was so lucky that that happened, that they took it off. But it really
Right.
taught me. Also, I noticed the more good reviews I had, the more bookings I was getting. So it's really like it's a feed. Like make sure you're getting good reviews and do not get bad reviews. Yeah.
Noted, noted. Well, I appreciate you sharing all this because I'm sure there's people out there like trying to figure this exact thing out, and hopefully it can
Right.
help someone.
100%. And I'm sure it's not just ZocDoc. It's like anything. It's like Google or this or that. Like get good reviews, don't get bad. Try your best not to get bad reviews. You know.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
And
Uh,
listen, like you can't please everyone, but to the best of your ability. That's what I would say.
yeah. So do you feel like ever since you've kind of cracked that code that it's been relatively easier, like kind of growing
Yeah.
your practice?
100%. It's much easier. Ideally, I wouldn't want to rely on ZocDoc. Like ideally, I'd have my own website doing all the advertising for me in a sense because like I said, I get one bad review on ZocDoc, so I'm done. You know, like it's just better not to rely on other people if you don't have to. But yeah, they do a good job. So for now, it's fine. But yeah, once I cracked that code, it was very easy. And that for me was the only thing that worked. I know other people, Psychology Today works for them. They get referrals from doctors or this or that. I've never gotten any referrals from a doctor. Nothing. I got one referral from Psychology Today that actually materialized to a client, and that's about it. Like nothing else works except for ZocDoc. And I don't even know why. My page is exactly the same on all the platforms. So I don't know why this one's working for me and that one's not, and I really don't know. You know?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that there's a lot of this kind of like business building where it's like you got to try a crap load of different things, and like one is suddenly going to work and the other ones weren't working. You don't really understand why, and that's just like
Right.
the way it is.
Right.
So yeah, it sounds like that was kind of the process that you went through, and then
Yeah.
ZocDoc turned out to be the winning horse for whatever
Right.
reason.
Yeah, and it's still the winning horse. Literally, like just one day, I turned on my availability, 12 clients in a day, like a few, like I don't know, like a few hours. You know, it's crazy.
Incredible.
Yeah, really
Incredible.
incredible. Yeah,
So your focus in like, do you have kind of like a focus in terms of your therapy, or like how does that
yeah.
work?
I like to work with young adult men, partly because like that's the stage that I'm just most recently going through. But yeah, I love working with anyone. Honestly, I've worked with older people, women of all ages. You know, and it's a lot of fun. It's just I like working with people, but young adult men because I feel like it's a very tumultuous time for any young adult, you know, and you're trying to figure out your life. And I think for men especially, we need guidance. We need people that are, you know, every Luke Skywalker has the Obi-Wan, and you know, Harry has Dumbledore, and whatever. We could go on and on, but it's the classic story, and I feel like I find a lot of meaning in being able to help somebody navigate a very challenging point in life,
Yeah.
and I feel like I'm good at it too, so that helps.
I love that. Well,
Yeah.
two thoughts. I forgot to say this before, but I was like, I could totally see you being the awesome school counselor. So I was like, oh, I forgot to mention that before, but I was like, I could totally picture this, and I feel like I could totally see the kids being like totally obsessed with you. So I think that's amazing.
Yeah,
But
thank you.
to this point, I love that this is your like focus, because I feel like especially there's still, I think there's a bit of a gap in terms of like men going to therapy, and like that still hasn't become quite as normalized in the way that therapy in general I think has
Yeah,
been, but I think it's more female focused, or it has been.
right.
So I think it's really important that you're kind of like opening up the dialogue and the conversation of having men actually seek therapy more. Would you agree with all that?
I would. I think the tide is turning though. I do think it's
Yeah.
becoming more normal for men to seek help. So I'm coming up on a good time now. Um, but yeah, it's definitely true. I definitely think, you know, a lot of men are told to bottle up and, you know, not express, and it's so strange because like I just explained, every story and ever, you know, a man needs somebody to help guide them through the task, you know? So it's just it's strange. It's almost like a disconnect in the culture where it's like a man is expected to be independent, but yet every movie there's never a man that's completely independent. You know, every man on the hero's journey has a mentor. So, yeah.
I think that's such a good point. And yeah, I hope that any man that's listening to this episode is going to hear that and resonate with it, because I feel like, yeah, I feel like there's this kind of toxic masculinity that kind of tells men especially that like they need to figure it out on their own, or they're supposed to be the ones figuring it out. And it's
Right.
interesting because I think of like men to women relationships, and it's like men often want to be the fixer of like women's problems, and women are like, no, I just want you to listen to me. And that's like I feel like that's such like a common dynamic that goes on. I don't know if you would agree, but I think that's such a common dynamic is like men believe like I have to fix everything.
Right.
And so therefore it's like, oh, and I need to go it alone and I'm supposed to have all the answers.
Yeah, exactly.
And so like breaking that down and going like, no, that's actually not what you need to do.
Right.
And you can get help is such a like an empowering, frankly,
It's so empowering, and
thing.
I'll tell you also, I think a lot of it is framing. Sorry, I interrupted, but I
Oh
think a
no.
lot of it, yeah, a lot of it is framing. Like men don't want to feel like they're weak, and they don't want to feel like they are dumb. They don't want to feel like they need help. You know, so I think that if some of the angle of coming into therapy is like, oh, that means I'm weak, or that means I need help. That means I'm dumb. Like this person, like like that aspect. And nobody likes to feel any of those things. But I think it is like especially important for men to to feel like they're competent and to feel like they're strong and to feel like they're capable. So, I think the framing of therapy, if it's more like no, like going to therapy doesn't mean any of those things. It doesn't mean that at all. It means like you're trying to improve and you're on this path of development and growing yourself to be the best man that you can be. Like you're still strong. How can you apply that strength to your life? You are smart. Like how can you use that intelligence to solve your problems and to create an even more beautiful life of your dreams? You are strong. You can get through this. Like here's how, like let's talk about how and getting through it. And having that like type of angle coming from that is so empowering and I think better angle for men. You know.
I love that. I love that. I think the thing that was ringing true to me is like we've looked at therapy as a form of weakness in the
Right.
past. And I actually think the exact opposite is
Yeah.
true, is
100%.
actually seeking out therapy or coaching or whatever is really a form of strength.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. It's a
Yeah.
form of strength. It's a resource for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. I love that. All right. I feel like I could keep talking to you forever, but I know that you might have some like
Yeah.
what was the you have a
I have
someone
an
coming.
electrician, yeah, coming.
So let's start to wrap up. So let me first say, is there anything that we haven't covered off on that you would like to share?
Yes, guys, go send Jessica love. Subscribe to this episode. Subscribe to this. Flow, what was it? The flow permission to flow.
Permission to Flow is
I
now the
love
name
that.
of the
Yeah,
podcast.
I love that's so fun. I want to ask you like why permission to flow.
Ooh, it was interesting because to me, it was funny. I'll give you a really quick story. What happened was I didn't think I was going to change the name, and then I happened to be in London and hanging out with a friend of mine who's also a coach and someone else, a friend of hers, and we're like spitballing on the idea, and I was like explaining like what I want this podcast to be, and really it was like when I was like, oh, I want it to be like creative but spiritual and like all these different things, and her friend was like, it needs the word flow. Because if you think about flow, it's like creative flow, like, there's
Yeah,
so many ways, like flow states, like going with the flow. Like, I just love that word so much, like yoga flow. And then to me, it's like permission it's so much of like, to me, a lot of what we struggle with is giving ourselves permission. So it's not about the influence of everyone else. It's more like how can we allow ourselves to be in flow? How can we allow the good things to come in and feel, and not get caught up in like the shoulds and the have tos.
yeah.
And so that's why it became permission to flow. That's the short answer.
I love that. Yeah, no, that's so beautiful, and it's such good like catch there because I see exactly what she was saying about how flow is like creativity and spirituality.
Okay. All right. So let's dive into our final questions so you can get on to your electrician and all the things that are going on in your life.
Thank you.
All right. So first question is, how would you describe your current relationship to yourself?
Oh, that's a great question. I really have to pause and think about it because I think so much has changed since like becoming a father.
Mm.
And I think before I was very into journaling, and I've always had a very strong relationship with myself. Um, meditation, very much just enjoying my own thoughts, like just being able to sit with myself and like just entertaining myself through my own thought patterns process and like just observing it and trying to go deep. Recently, I haven't had as much time with that, but I would say I definitely love myself very strongly, and I should spend more time with myself. Like, I'll tell you actually, oh my God, this is something I think people need to do. And when I tell my friends that, like, whatever, there's a bit of I have a bit of a vain kind of streak to me, amongst my friends, I'm like the vain one. But um, last year, I started celebrating birth week, and I would do like a whole week with like to celebrate my birthday, just the whole week. And one of the things that I did was I celebrated a whole day with myself, just myself. So I went to a Broadway show, I went to a restaurant, I went to a bar, I went to another restaurant. So like just the whole day, just totally with myself, like just celebrating, and I had the best time ever, the best time. So I genuinely like I love myself. I love being able to just spend time with myself and stuff like that. And I love other people too, and I love spending time with other people. But yeah, I would say my relationship with myself is strong.
I love that. Side note is that I didn't do a whole week, but I did like 2 days of celebration, and one day was just my celebration by myself.
Oh, I love that.
Very
That's great.
similar. So
Yeah,
like that is so funny that you say that.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I spent mine totally differently, but like I was like painting and like doing my own thing, and I was just like, everyone leave me alone. Like I had like a very like
right.
personal little day because yeah, and then like I had another day where it was like full celebration with everyone else, but it
Yeah,
was like I got to like enjoy that experience of like having my own like celebration. So I love that. I love that so much.
thank you.
We're
Uh,
so similar. I love it.
that's funny.
All right, your next question is what is something that you are currently working on? And this could be like physically or mentally, whatever way you want to take it.
No, that's a good question. I'm working on building this studio. I had this room here in the basement of a house that I'm renting, like an apartment. It's a two-family house. So I have this room that I'm like turning into a studio. So I've been painting it. I had to do so much work in this thing. Oh my God, it's been taking me a lot longer than I thought it would. But yeah, that's my project right now, just building this studio space.
I love it. I love
Yeah.
it. All right, what do you consider most valuable to you?
My daughter, like by far, there's like nothing even in comparison that like is anything. Literally, like I would die for her like a thousand times. Like literally, just there's like no comparison. Like not only that, I don't think there's anything that could ever be considered meaningful relative to that. Um, yeah,
That's beautiful. I love that.
yeah.
What is the best lesson you've learned recently? Or it could be your favorite lesson.
My favorite lesson. My favorite lesson is this. When I was 16, okay, can I get into a story actually?
Of
That was
course.
my favorite lesson.
I'm never going to say no.
Yeah, when I was in high school, okay, this is gonna sound so sad right now. I never read a book until I was 16. The first book I ever read from cover to cover was when I was 16. And I thought I was like proud of that. I was so proud of that. And I was in summer camp, and my friend Chaim Moshe, shout out to him. He's like a huge bookworm. He like reads like literally a book a day. He's massive. Like he loves reading. He'll just literally read forever. But basically, I told him I was like, hey, give me a book that you think I would enjoy. So he hands me this book, Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. Because I realized I was like, hey, wait a second. What if I'm all proud of me being like never having read a book, and meanwhile I'm the dumb one, you know? I was like, you know what? That's changing today. So he hands me this book, Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson, and it's the 652-page book. And I look at it and I'm like, I will read this book cover to cover. I don't care how bad it is, how boring. Like I will read this book just to prove to myself that I can, you know? But anyways, I started reading this book. It was amazing. It was the best book. It's still my favorite book to this day. I love this book. It's a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant book. But basically, without trying to get into a spoiler, one of the main characters, his name is Kelsier, and the other main character, her name is Vin. Vin has massive trust issues. She grew up very tortured and abused and all that. Massive, massive, massive trust issues. Kelsier is this like badass, like just awesome leader. He's like really brilliant, like mastermind kind of person. And basically, Kelsey was betrayed by his wife. Like, this is something that happened, like, part of, like, the background in the book. He was betrayed by his wife. And Vin, who's this girl, was like, and Kelsey, like, he assembled, like, this amazing team, you know, and everyone trusts him, everyone loves him, and Vin asked him, like, how do you trust anybody? Why do you love people? Like, you've been betrayed, and all that. And Kelsey is just like, given the choice of loving Mare was his wife's name, given the choice of loving Mare and, like, betrayal included, and never knowing her, I would choose love, you know? Mm-hmm. And that, to me, I think, it's kind of a cliche. It's not, like, Brandon, I don't think he made up that concept, but I think that, to me, is, like, a very beautiful lesson that, for some reason, came to my mind when you asked me what my favorite lesson is. But, yeah, I think it's so important to continue to get back up, despite us being hurt and heartbroken, to be able to love again and trust again and be okay, you know, and be happy, give ourselves permission to be happy and permission to flow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. I love that. It makes me think of, like, just how it's like all the good, it's like we take the good with the bad that comes with it, but it's still worth it at the end of the day is kind of what it sounds like.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's still worth it at the end of the day. Like, there's a lot of bad and there's a lot of good, and being able to, like, have that paradigm where you're really maximizing the good, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Beautiful, beautiful story and lesson.
Thank you.
Okay, your last question, which I'm very curious what your answer is going to be to this, but what do you see as the purpose or meaning of life?
Wow. Okay, broad question. I could answer for, like, myself, but I think more generally, if we're thinking, like, what is the purpose or meaning of life, I genuinely think it's just to be, you know? Like, I my kind of philosophy is that we're all extensions of God, you know? We're part of whatever this universe / infinity is. Like, we're all connected. We're obviously, like, we can obviously understand that we are physically a part of the universe. You know, our cells and our atoms are made from the same stuff that everything else is, that whatever came from the Big Bang or whatever you want to believe. But it's all just, you know, we came from matter, and we're going to die, and we're going to come back into the earth, and perhaps our soul, which might be separated from physical matter, who knows, it's connected to something as well. And I genuinely do think we're this extension of whatever is infinite in this universe. And I think we're here just it's entertaining, you know? It's, like, fun, being a part of it for the good and bad. And I think everything is meaningful, even the most mundane things. So, like, what's the purpose of it? Part of it is just, like, enjoy the ride, enjoy the journey. Part of it is, like, yeah, probably we do have some type of bigger calling that we should probably do, some type of purpose that was meant for us, some type of, I guess, karma, if you want to call it.
I've just been reflecting on the fact that we're called human beings and the word being in there, of, like, how can we just be? It's just so, I feel like that's what you were speaking to, of, like, just being in this, whatever, this universal creation that we're a part of. So I love that answer. That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. Guys, subscribe to Jessica's channel and call her for coaching, and then come over to my channel and subscribe as well. All right.
Absolutely. Yeah. So please share how people can contact you if they want to learn more.
Yeah, sure. So my Instagram is @journeywithgabi. You could DM me there. And then my YouTube channel is Gabi Koyenov. I have my podcast plus YouTube videos, which I've not been posting in a while, but will continue to be posting YouTube videos once my studio is finished. And then you could go on my website, the Men's Therapy Studio, to book a session, and I accept many insurances, so you could see me for as little as free to a copay of whatever, $50, whatever it is. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, definitely go and subscribe to Gabi's YouTube, podcast, everything, and go and work with him because he's amazing. So thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been such a pleasure getting to have these, like, incredible conversations with you, and it's I love this. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Okay, yeah, of course, and thank you for having me. I'm so grateful, and let's do something again soon, you know?
Absolutely. I hope to see you at more podcasting events and everything, and keep growing our channels together. It's so fun.
Yeah, this has been awesome.
Want to create more flow in your life? Go to the description below and sign up for the email list. I'll be sharing more insights and strategies with you, just like the ones you heard today. Remember, the power to create the life you desire resides within you, and I'm here to support you every step of the way. The world needs what you will create.